team, the Institute of Social Accountability, and the Institute of Economic Affairs, and University of Nairobi African Women Economic Empowerment Hub. Mr. Speaker, sir, on statements, the committee has considered and concluded the following 3 statements. Statement on allegation of unsettled and unremitted statutory pay-as-you-earn payee deductions for the staff in the county assemblies that was requested by Senator Eddie Gicheru Okech, MP, on the 2nd of March 2023. A statement on Kenya Revenue Authority Kenya Revenue Authority is moved to suspend tax relief funds, exemptions, waivers, and abandonment with immediate effect that affected the persons living with disabilities, which was requested by Senator Crystal Asigi, MP, on the 7th of March 2023. And the statement concerning disbursement of funds to county government that was sought by Senator Godfrey Osoti, MP, on Thursday, 28th of March 2023. Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee has received and considered responses on a number of statements. However, the responses were found inadequate, and thus the committee resolved to invite the relevant institutions to a meeting to provide further clarification. These statements are statement on the status of pending bills in Kakamega County by Senator Dr. Boni Khalwale, CBS MP. The statement on status of pending bills in Kisii County and county government, Kisii County, which was sought by Senator Richard Onyonka, MP. Statement regarding the status of Kenya Revenue Authority, KRA, collections that was requested by Senator Enoch Wambua, MP. The statement on reintroduction of bank charges on mobile wallets that was requested by Senator Samson Cherargei, MP. And statement concerning claims of fraudulent activities involving various banks that was requested by Senator Maureen Tabitha, MP. And statement concerning alleged predatory asset-based lending by microfinance institutions in Kenya that was requested by Senator Eddie Okech, MP. Mr. Speaker, sir, committee is in the process of scheduling meetings to deliberate on the responses received for the following statements. Statement concerning claims of disposal of state-owned entities through privatization without the approval of Parliament sought by Senator Hamida Kibwana, MP. Statement concerning the readiness of uptake of Green Climate Fund capacity building program for legislators in Kenya sought by Senator Hamida Kibwana, MP. Statement concerning delays in disbursement of exchequer releases to counties and reports of hacking of the integrated financial management system by Senator Fatuma Dulo, MP. A statement on reduction of salaries and allowances for the MCAs in the financial year 2022-2023 by Senator Samson Cherargei, MP. A statement regarding the utilization of equalization fund in the county government of Taita Taveta requested by Senator Mwaruma, MP. And statement concerning review of salaries, benefits, and allowances for judges and magistrates requested by Senator Samson Cherargei, MP. Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee has also requested for responses from the relevant institutions on the following statements. Statement concerning claims of economic crisis in the country by Senator Richard Onyonka, MP. A statement regarding withholding VAT obligation on petroleum products and its impact on business by Senator Hamida Kibwana, MP. A statement on status of the 16 billion pending bills by the Nairobi Metropolitan Services requested by Dr. Boni Khalwale, CBS, MP. A statement concerning the status of pending bills in Kisumu County requested by Senator Professor Tom Ojienda, MP, and statement regarding pending bills in Wajir County sought by Senator Abbas Mohammed, MP. On issues of petitions before the committee, Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee is currently considering a petition in a petition on regulation of credit profession by CCP Mokaya Magembe Bernard, Council of Institute of Credit Management, Kenya, that was committed to the committee on 23rd May 2023. The committee held a consultative meeting with the petitioner. Further, the committee resolved to invite the governor of CBK to a consultative meeting to deliberate on the matter. However, upon the invitation by the committee on the different matter, the governor of CBK, via a letter dated 11 July 2023, requested for more time to allow for briefing and familiarization with various matters of central bank before appearing before the committee, as he was newly appointed. The committee considered and acceded to the request of the governor of CBK. The committee resolved to invite the governor in the month of August. On the issues of legislative proposal considered by the committee, Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee carried out pre-publication scrutiny, examined the following legislative proposals, and submitted its comments to the Speaker pursuant to Standing Order 131(1)B of the Standing Orders. 1. Public Finance Management Act Amendment by Senator Hamida Kibwana, MP. Public Procurement and Disposal Act Amendment by Senator George Mbugua, MP. Insolvency Act Amendment by Senator Maureen Tabitha Mutinda, MP. And the County Public Finance Laws Amendment Bill 2023 by Senator Kathuri Murungi, MP. Mr. Speaker, sir, on activities for the committee in the next quarter, Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee is scheduled to consider the following business in the next quarter. Consideration of the county government cash disbursement schedule, equitable share for financial year 2023-2024, equalization fund appropriation bill for the financial year 2023-2024, follow up on the implementation of projects funded through the conditional grant on supplement of construction of county headquarters as requested by the Council of Governors, the county government revenue raising process, Senate Bill number 22 of 2023, petition on regulation of credit professional practitioners, and finally, consideration of Public Finance Management Amended Bill, National Assembly Bill number 16 of 2023. Mr. Speaker, sir, I thank you.
Before I allow the clerk to call the next order, pursuant to Standing Order 45-2, I will proceed to rearrange the sequence of today's order paper. We will defer order number 8 all the way to 14 and proceed from order 15 onwards. Clerk, call the next order. Yes, what is your point of order?
Mr. Speaker, I rise in accordance to Standing Order number 56-3 that the Speaker may allow comments or observations in relation to the report tabled under paragraph 1B for not more than 20 minutes. So we want to beg your indulgence, Mr. Speaker, that having listened to all the 3 reports, it was our understanding that perhaps we'll be allowed to make a few comments on these reports. We beg your indulgence, Speaker.
Yes, Senator Cheriot, you know you cannot stand on a point of order on that particular matter, because whom do you want to call to order? Is it the chair? I will proceed to allow, before the clerk call the next order, I will allow limited intervention of these 3 statements. I'll start with Senator Cherangei.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While I appreciate understanding order 56(1)B, the committee should report activities. Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised that the 3 statements by both chairpersons have been just reporting. When you read understanding order 56, and it is good the majority leader is here so that he can guide them, it says, Mr. Speaker, that a statement made under 1B, 1, the bill, statements and petition considered by the committee and the status of which In all the reports by the 3 committees, he has just been reporting. They are saying Senator Cherargei has a certain statement, but they are not giving us status. They have not given us the status of the bills. For example, I have a bills against livestock theft in this country. Up to now, the Committee of National Security has not called me, has not engaged stakeholders. So, Mr. Speaker, and also any inquiries undertaken by the committee and progress of any such inquiry, of course, county visits their state, the matter and extent to which the committee meets its public participation obligations. For example, on the cost of electricity, Mr. Speaker, I would have expected, why is electricity expensive in Kenya? I would have expected a committee of energy to give the country way forward on the high cost of electricity, Mr. Speaker. Even on the status of health in my county, there is no pragmatic feedback, almost 1 month, Mr. Speaker. And then finally it says, the status of implementation of resolution of the Senate relating to matters within the mandate of the committee. Mr. Speaker, I'm disappointed by the reports by the 3 committees. It is just reporting. There is no status, which violates our standing order number 56. I want to urge Majority Leader and the whip and the liaison chaired by the deputy to be more serious, Mr. Speaker. We cannot operate like this way, Mr. Speaker, and if it is possible, we are willing to get more funding to the Majority Leader to organize capacity building so that we can have pragmatic results, Mr. Speaker. I am disappointed by 3 statements. I hope you will give proper guidance and directions at the close of this reaction. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Senator Roba.
Okay.
Senator Roba, I hope.
Thank you. I
do
will
not intend to go through again that report.
No, I don't.
Proceed.
Mr. Speaker, sir, thank you very much. Senator Cherargei has raised an issue in line with the standing order. However, in the report of the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget, we have structured the report because of the limited time we have in terms of what is executed to conclusion, which we've discussed bills that have been processed to logical conclusion, which are now acts of parliament. Likewise, on statements that are sought, we have discussed statements that have been processed and concluded with the honorable senators who've raised the statements advised appropriately as shared in the report in line with the standing orders just discussed by my colleague Senator Cherargei. On the statements that we have processed and we've received responses, and even from the committee's interrogation of the responses, we found inadequate. We've structured it as such and advised that these statements are undergoing further review because we've invited the respective respondents to be able to come over and provide further information before we can now pass the information we've received to the respective senators who have raised the statements, Mr. Speaker, sir. And Mr. Speaker, sir, on also the issues that relates to petitions, we've discussed the progress so far of what we have done. I do not know whether honorable colleague has managed to interrogate the report as shared, but I want to invite him to go through the report, and maybe he will be able to see exactly what he has shared in the standing order as requirement for the report has been met by this report as shared. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Cheriot.
Mr. Speaker, sir, thank you for indulging us and giving us the opportunity to respond or rather give comments or make comments, Mr. Speaker, on the 3 reports that have been tabled by our colleagues who serve as chairpersons of the various committees of this House. Mr. Speaker, I'll be brief and perhaps take you from what Senator Cherargei has said. Mr. Speaker, though I'll be a bit more measured, if I may call it that, Mr. Speaker, I hold the view, I agree with Senator Cherargei in trying to challenge and push our committees to do better, to give us reports that perhaps go over and above the call and the demands of Standing Order number 56. Why do I say so, Mr. Speaker? I say this, Mr. Speaker, because I know the history of how we came up with Standing Order number 56. This is a new Standing Order, Mr. Speaker, recently introduced into the House and even amended further to list the kind of reports that committees need to bring to this House. Previously, Mr. Speaker, there was no such demand placed on our committees. Many times committees will just go about their duties and it will be left to the discussions of the House on how you feel. Do you feel that a certain committee is effectively carrying out its mandate or any other thing, as you may want to imagine, Mr. Speaker? But it was felt during the exit report preparation of previous sessions of this House, Mr. Speaker, or terms rather than a session, that there was need to place better demands on our committees and have a huge ask of them, and ask of them that every quarter, each committee furnishes this House with reports on businesses that they've considered. And we thought through and said, what are the things that Kenyans continue to raise and demand of us as a House of Parliament on how we go about our work? That is why, Mr. Speaker, for example, you will find the demand that each committee actually needs to file a report on what is how much they have how much they've engaged members of the public in the business that is before them. Because, Mr. Speaker, this is in response to what we saw happening in the courts. So many laws were annulled last time, Mr. Speaker, simply on the basis that Parliament did not do sufficient public participation, yet it is a constitutional edict, Mr. Speaker. And that's why you read it in Standing Order number 56, 1B, Mr. Speaker. That is just as an example. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I have keenly listened from yesterday when the various chairpersons began presenting their reports on their performance as a House. And I agree with Senator Cherargei, Mr. Speaker, that apart from giving statistics and figures, Mr. Speaker, on the business that is before them. You know, Mr. Speaker, if you're not careful, as a chairperson of a committee or as a member of this House, Mr. Speaker, you can easily become a conveyor belt, because Parliament is blessed with very competent staff, Mr. Speaker, who can barely do anything and everything that you ask of them, such that you're just left as a member of Parliament to come and read what has been prepared of you, you know, and have a seat, go home. Mr. Speaker, we listened this afternoon, for example, just because I don't intend to be long on this particular point, to statements by the Committee on Health, Committee on Budget and Finance, and the Committee on Energy, Mr. Speaker. And they have told us the businesses that have been presented before them, what it is that they are considering, what they have concluded. Perfect. And I agree with them completely. But the further question, which Senator Cherargei is asking, and which I agree with him, and perhaps is a question of many of the senators that are before the House this afternoon, Mr. Speaker, is what is their response to emerging issues, Mr. Speaker? I say this, Mr. Speaker, because Parliament must rise over and above the statutory provisions of Parliament. Just makes laws, it represents. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that Parliament is a body that is alive. They know the challenges that ordinary Kenyans continue to face. Mr. Speaker, we cannot be consuming 40 billion of taxpayers' money each and every financial year, Mr. Speaker, just to dispense and, you know, share certain information that we continue to receive from different quarters, Mr. Speaker. And I say this with tremendous respect. I congratulate our chairpersons. It's never easy to lead a committee of Parliament. Hats off to Senator Roba, leading our Budget and Finance Committee, the committee that has produced the most bills in this House, Mr. Speaker, and some of them very difficult. So when we say this, Senator Roba, is not out of a lack of appreciation of the kind of hard work that our chairpersons put in the work. But we say this because we want to make our committees better, Mr. Speaker. I have said this before this House, Mr. Speaker, and I continue to speak, that Senator Roba, if you read PFM regulations, regulation number 25, and God granted us a very good opportunity, Mr. Speaker, in the fact that we have a speaker who's a former governor, we have a chair of Budget and Finance who's a former governor, Mr. Speaker, and he understands the provisions of regulation number 25. That, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, there is not one county government out of all the 47 that are in compliance with this regulation that demands of them that 65% of the resources that we devolve via CARA in this House, Mr. Speaker, goes on to recurrent and 35% at development budget, Mr. Speaker. Many of them actually are doing below 10%. We cannot continue to sit and be the house that oversights county governments, yet do not demand from each of the 47 governors, Mr. Speaker, to file a recovery plan. This continuous business of receiving excuses, oh, we inherited, I don't know, stuff that are expensive from the defunct municipalities and all these stories. That's nonsense, Mr. Speaker, because we know for a fact that each of the successive sessions of the last 3 county governments, Mr. Speaker, hire new staff. These are the staff that are continue to consume a lot of money, Mr. Speaker. You see how governors operate, Mr. Speaker. That's why it's becoming expensive. Mr. Speaker, we are back to 2013 all over again. And I'm sorry to say this. You know, you remember when devolution came, Mr. Speaker, and I will excuse yours truly, Governor Mandago, Governor Roba, that perhaps you behave better, Mr. Speaker, or it's debatable to the people of Kilifi, Mandera, and Uasin Gishu. But you remember when devolution came, Mr. Speaker, that you had little gods in the names of governors who used to walk with all manner of retinue. One carrying the chair, another one carrying water for the governor, another whistling people to move out of a VIP toilet. Unfortunately, we are back there again, Mr. Speaker, because we have allowed them. We have allowed county governments to spend in excess of 75% on recurrent. Yes. That's the money that is being wasted, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I expect when each of our committees begin to file their reports, Senator Roba, in this next quarter that you're considering, demand when COG appears before you, let them place a recovery plan and let us know that, okay, there's a unique problem in a particular county. I know, for example, let me even give the example of my own county. Kericho, Mr. Speaker, used to be the municipality headquarters that now serves 2 counties. And therefore, many of the staff that used to serve the municipalities that were in Kericho and Bomet, most of, if not all of those staff were left in our county. And therefore, you'll find that their wage bill is slightly high. I believe there are many such challenges in various other counties, Mr. Speaker, and therefore, I think Mombasa is one such county. I know that from what I used to see when they presented their books when I served in Budget and Finance Committee. But it's not the same for all the 47 counties, Mr. Speaker. Why are counties, Mr. Speaker, some of whom that we are building headquarters for, Mr. Speaker, having more than 75% on their budget going to recurrent, Mr. Speaker, yet they don't have this challenge. And we know for a fact, you know this, Mr. Speaker, that the biggest headache is on personnel emolument. Who are these that they are paying, that it is consuming, and what is it that they are expending on many of these other charges to the county revenue account. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, those are the demands that you are making of our committees, that come and file with us live issues. Mr. Speaker, Senator Cherargei spoke of something that is going on, a debate that's ongoing in our country, Mr. Speaker, on the cost of electricity. When you listen to the report from the Committee of Energy, it's about we consider this petition, Senator so-and-so brought a question, there is this bill that you are considering, well and good, but I believe leadership is about going over and above the call of duty, Mr. Speaker. We want to hear the report, Mr. Speaker. Senator Wamatinga knows that we've had this discussion so many times, and we have demanded of him that reveal who are these IPP owners, Mr. Speaker, that are so powerful that they sell only 30% of the power that we consume, Mr. Speaker, is from these IPP providers. Yet, when you compare the amount of money that they consume overall, it's close to 60%. They charge hardly what KenGen is producing power for. The independent power producers that have got power purchase agreements with Kenya Power, Mr. Speaker, is almost 300% more expensive. Who are these faceless Kenyans? How privileged are they that they cannot be named? What are these contracts that were signed, Mr. Speaker, and who signed them that they cannot be revealed in the Houses of Parliament, Mr. Speaker, so that we bring down the cost of power? Those are the issues that are alive before Kenyans. And that's why we included that specific provision of Standing Order number 56(1)B, Mr. Speaker, how much each committee engages the public. I am sure if you go and say, I am a member of the committee, we are here as a Senate Energy Committee, Mr. Speaker, in any village in this republic, you will not get to the second speaker when members of the public begin to speak without being questioned on the cost of power. That's why we put in place that provision, Mr. Speaker, so that Parliament and Senate can be alive to the issues that continue to challenge the people of Kenya. The same can be said. Senator Mandago, you know UHC, and we listened to the report from your Committee on Health, read by your Vice Chair, Senator Mariam Sheikh, Mr. Speaker. Good report, fantastic, on the bills that are being considered, the business that is before them. But, Mr. Speaker, you know that the most alive conversation presently that we have in the country, this business, number one, of UHC, number two, on human resource personnel.
Senator Robert, what is your point of order?
Mr. Speaker, sir, you know, in trying to correct my majority leader, I don't know whether it is inappropriate or otherwise, but in line with Standing Order number 56, 1B as well as 2, the issues under question are limited in response. What we are required to provide is a report of the committee on quarterly report. And as such, we can only report generally on issues that are within the quarter as required by Standing Order number 56, 1B and 2A, as to what the committee has transacted within the specified time period. Not in general the issues that are alive or popular issues that will identify with the public for that matter, Mr. Speaker, sir. And because of that limitation, what the committees will be able to put forth in form of a report will be limited. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now, Senator Cheriot, indeed, what I understood from you is trying to push the committees to go beyond what is given of them or what is demanded of them under Standing Order 56-2. Because under Standing Order 56-2, it actually tells the committee on what areas to report. And I think that is where Senator Cherengei came in, saying, indeed, even if you are to look at Standing Order 56-2, there's some reports that have not adequately contained in their report most of the requirements under Standing Order 56-2. For example, if you look at Standing Order 56-2, the bills, statements, petitions considered by the committee and the status of each. So we've heard about the bills, the statements and the petitions, but the status aspect was missing. And that is what Senator Cherengei captured. So going forward, and to have standard reports, let the reports reflect the contents as demanded of the report under Standing Order 56-2. If indeed there's anything to be reported over and above that, because I want to believe that, and this is coming from the observation and concern raised by the majority leader, that having dispensed your duties under Standing Order 56-2, and there's a matter that is live in the country, I think a committee should be able, on its own motion, to move and address that and also capture it in the report for that quarter. That's what I understood the majority leader to be saying. So let us stand guided. Majority leader, have you concluded? Sure.
Mr. Speaker, you put it way better than perhaps I could have. The specific standing order that I refer to, which I wish our colleagues can look at, is 56-2D, that the manner and extent to which the committee met its public participation obligations in respect of the business of the committee. And I gave, Mr. Speaker, when I began my presentation, I gave the history of how we got this standing order here and the purpose for which it is meant. it is exactly for what you have just defined. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, we run the risk of being a house that simply, you're like on a treadmill. Just all you need to do is lift your legs and, you know, you assume that you're making progress, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, that is the basis upon which I base my submissions, that I think over and above what has been reported in 56(2)(a) on the bill, statements, petitions considered by the committee, other matters that arise. That's why I gave the example of the Committee on Energy. And I said, it doesn't matter whatever bill you're presently prosecuting. If you have a public participation forum as a Senate Energy Committee, and I said I can bet my last coin, Mr. Speaker, that you will not get to the second or the third member of the public who will speak on the issues before you without referring to the issue of the cost of electricity and many such things. And the same can be said about finance, about health, and all these other preparations. And therefore, it's our proposal and humble submission to our committee chairpersons that as they prepare these quarterly reports, that probably we could be appraised of the same. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the only final point that I was mentioning on the Health Committee is that I said, in fact, over and above just giving us this report during this session, Mr. Speaker, it's our expectation as a House that when there is a major policy declaration that is about to be made, the committee can lead us into understanding and appreciating what that particular issue is. For example, on this matter of UHC, I believe at the right time, when the policy documents eventually get to Parliament, we will look up to the Committee of Health to guide us and help us as Senate to understand and appreciate better. Because I know our committees our members in that particular committee at least have had the opportunity to interact with the proposals better than the rest of us, so that as we come to debate, we'll be better informed. Otherwise, I appreciate the good work that all our chairpersons are doing, and with specific reference, if there is any doubt that has been created, to Senator Ali Roba, Captain, His Excellency, Senator, all those things, and Senator Jackson Mandago. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Mandago.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make a few comments on the matter of the report. First, I agree with what Senator Cherargei and Senator Aaron Cheruiyot is saying, not in its entirety, but to the extent that in terms of the quality and the contents of the report, Mr. Speaker, what is normally read is just a summary. Mr. Speaker, as a new senator in this House, I've been wondering what happens to very, very good recommendations that we make in conclusions of our reports. How are we as a House going to follow up in some of those matters, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, I say this because my Committee of Health has investigated matters to do with deaths in some of our facilities, Mr. Speaker. And in that investigation, Mr. Speaker, we found issues to do with negligence, we found issues to do with lack of equipment, we found issues to do with lack of implementation of policy and regulations from the ministry. And as much as we've unearthed all those things, put them in the report, Mr. Speaker, I would want to be guided as the Chair for Health. How do we make sure that this is implemented so that we also don't produce reports that end up not being utilized? And Mr. Speaker, I agree with Senator Majority Leader when he says when there are active conversations. In my committee, Mr. Speaker, the issue of universal health coverage is so central to the Kenya Kwanza administration. But Mr. Speaker, we are a very frustrated committee because from when we came to this House and when the committees were established, the Cabinet Secretary for Health has never appeared before a committee. She has never honored us having an induction session to scrutinize the program of UAC, Mr. Speaker. We only deal with matters when they have processed and they want us to just go there during the launch, Mr. Speaker. And we find it extremely very difficult as a committee, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are scheduled to have the CS for Health on Friday, and we hope she will appear before the committee so that those matters can be prosecuted. I agree that we need probably in our order papers, Mr. Speaker, time to appraise the House on matters that are alive in the general populace as a conversation, Mr. Speaker. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I only want to disagree with the majority leader that, you know, in 2013, we were aware governors were small goats. Mr. Speaker, it is not our making, Mr. Speaker, and I think there is a session we need to have. How you induct people into a program and an office, you later on don't come and blame them, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I can tell you, the first meeting we had as elected governors of this country in 2013, we were invited to a meeting, a very high-level meeting, Mr. Speaker, in Naivasha, Great Rift. We were 47 governors, senators were there, and guess who were doing the induction? It was the Attorney General of this country, the Chair of Transition Authority, the Chair of SRC, and others. And Mr. Speaker, when the forum was being closed, the Attorney General then the governor. So we never went to River Jordan or River Muiben or River Nairobi and baptized ourselves, His Excellency, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is what we were inducted into. Mr. Speaker, I remember the issue of the national flag being flown by governors became an issue. It was not the making of governors. It was during that induction and inauguration of governors, Mr. Speaker, that we found our vehicles already fitted with a flag. And we only drove in the vehicles that were fitted with a flag, with a very new title. What were we supposed to do when we have been given an induction and we have been released officially to go to work? So, Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to reiterate that so that we really understand. The other aspect, Mr. Speaker, that I think we need to prosecute is the issue of recurrent expenditure in counties. And I've said time and again, there is need for the...
What is your point of order, Senator Kenya?
Mr. Speaker, I have listened to the Senator of Uasin Gishu, and he said he disagrees with the majority leader, Senator Aaron Cheriot, who said the governors were treated like small gods. But he goes ahead to confirm they were gods, Mr. Speaker, so I don't understand why he's disagreeing with the majority. He should have said, he confirms what majority leader said. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Madago, I hope you listened to yourself when you, because I actually heard that earlier on when you started, you disagreed midway, you confirmed that fact which the commissioner is saying. You did, if you listen to yourself. Proceed, Senator.
Mr. Speaker, I don't want to argue with my senator for Laikipia, an employer at PSC, but he even never said he was rising when we standing order, Mr. Speaker. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, he has rose and he has made his point, but I was just trying to emphasize that some of the things we see in counties might not be the making of counties. Finally, Mr. Speaker, let me say this. And it is good, my colleague, Senator for Mandera, is a chair for finance. These issues of recurrent expenditure, Mr. Speaker, we have said there is need to review the accounting reporting standard, particularly on this matter of recurrent expenditure, Mr. Speaker. If we remove personal emoluments, Mr. Speaker, the rest, some of the recurrent expenditures are development in nature. And I'll tell you, Mr. Speaker, for example, in counties, procurement of drugs and non-pharmaceuticals are recurrent expenditure, Mr. Speaker. Training, Mr. Speaker, is a recurrent expenditure. Mr. Speaker, fuel you use in building a road for own equipment in counties is a recurrent expenditure, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, it would be suffice to say there is need for reclassification of recurrent expenditures, Mr. Speaker, so that we can have the correct view of the spending in counties. Mr. Speaker, we are not saying counties are doing very well 100%. There are issues that we shall need to address as a Senate, and I agree with the majority leader that in our quest of oversight, we must come up with a proper framework where every senator will have a framework for oversighting their activities in their counties. And Mr. Speaker, when we are at that point, Mr. Speaker, I would propose that there be a legislation that puts into place the process of oversight in counties, so that, Mr. Speaker, governors also don't imagine senators are on a witch and mission. Mr. Speaker, it would be good if we put in a financial year the budget of that county, an oversight framework, so that under meeting between the executive and the senator and his team for oversight with the MCAs, Mr. Speaker, and we agree on a framework of oversight, so that when senators go to the field, Mr. Speaker, to check on projects, to ask questions, is within a certain framework that will enable the Senate to make very meaningful progress in terms of oversight, Mr. Speaker, and make sure that the funds that go to counties do impact the lives of citizens at the county level. Mr. Speaker, I beg to submit.
Thank you, Senator Mandago. The chair notes that in the course of your submissions, Senator Mandago, you inquired as to the fate of the reports that are tabled by the various committees in the House. And I would like to just confirm that understanding Order 225, it speaks about reports on Senate resolutions. In essence, it speaks about what happens to the reports which are submitted before the House. And when you read it, Senator Mandago, the clerk within 7 days of receiving the report from the committee, that is the resolution or recommendations that have been made, it is supposed to proceed to write to the relevant ministry or commission, whether independent or government agency. And then you read under 2252, the clerk shall, within 7 days of a resolution of the Senate or adoption of a report of a select committee, convey the resolution and, where applicable, a copy of the report to the relevant cabinet secretary, independent commission or holder of an independent office under whose portfolio the implementation of the resolution falls. And 2252 says, within 60 days of a resolution being conveyed to the relevant cabinet secretary, independent commission or holder of an independent office, under paragraph 1, such person shall provide a report to the relevant committee of the Senate in accordance with Article 153, 4B and 254(2) of the Constitution. That basically lays out the basis upon which you as a committee, for example, can now begin to follow up the implementation of the reports that you have made. And that sort of will guide the House and the Select Committee to ensure that the recommendations like what we have received today from the Select Committee on Health, Finance, or Energy, this House can follow, particularly through the Select Committee. And I believe the relevant committee chairs can also utilize the provisions of this article to ensure that those recommendations do not just gather dust, or because of the time frame that is provided, they should be able to reopen should there be no action on the part of the relevant commission or cabinet secretary or an authorized person within the relevant government agency that the report has been submitted to. Honorable members, that sums it up for the comments which we had granted to the members to comment on the report submitted this afternoon by the relevant committees of Health, Finance and Energy. Senator Cherargei, what is your point of order?
Mr. Speaker, as we proceed, I wanted to request your guidance and direction of the House. If you notice Order number 19, the Prevention of Livestock and Produce Theft Bill, Senate Bill number 12 of 2023, which the honor is yours truly, I needed your guidance since the committee, this bill went to Committee of National Security, or is it Agriculture? Mr. Speaker, I was never invited. The stakeholders were never invited. I have not seen the committee report, so I needed your guidance whether I'm allowed to move the bill if time or when I'm called upon to, or I should wait for stakeholders' engagement and also the committee report before proceeding in moving my bill, because I know that the neatness and tradition of the House is to at least be in comparison with the committee report, so that when I'm moving, I can know the reservations or especially because, Mr. Speaker, this bill comes in place at the time when we are fighting cattle rustling and cattle theft and produce across the country, especially North Rift where I come from and parts of northern Kenya. So I would have thought even this bill should have defined the role of the Senate in terms of coming to solutions against cattle rustling and cattle theft and animal produce theft across the country, not only in North Rift but across all areas. Mr. Speaker, I thought I should get guidance so that I proceed. And I know the presence of the bishop who has just walked in, the deputy minority leader. And I hope, Mr. Speaker, apart from praying for the victims of police brutality, they should also pray for the police that were killed and other police that over 300 that are recuperating. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Cherargei. You began very well by asking the chair to guide you. And just to remind you, where the House is, we are in order number 15. Remember earlier on the substantive speaker rearranged the order paper and deferred from order number 8 through to 14. We are in order number 15, and I will accordingly guide you when order number 19 is called out. Thank you. Clerk, let's call the next order.
Order number 15, the County Licensing Uniform Procedure Bill, Senate Bills number 9 of 2022, second reading, resumption of debate interrupted on Tuesday, 25th July, 2023.
This was Senator Mungatana is not present. He had a balance of 7 minutes in his last presentation before the House, and in his absence, Senator Boni Halwale. No, Boni already spoke to you. You already spoke to this bill. Honorable members, I'm opening the floor for any member who is keen to speak to this particular bill. Senator David Wakoli Wafula.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa nafasi hii. Ningependa tu kuchangia machache kuhusu mswada ambao Senator ameibua, kwamba lazima serikali za kaunti ziwe na mfumo wa elektroniki ambao utakuwa unahusishwa ama kutumika katika kuhakikisha kwamba watu wanapata leseni zao kwa wakati unaostahili, na vile vile kupitia mfumo huu itakuwa rahisi kufuatilia ni watu wangapi wamesajiliwa na kupewa leseni za kufanya kazi katika kaunti husika. Mheshimiwa Spika, katika mswada ambao Senator ameleta kwenye bunge ni kuhakikisha kwamba serikali itakuwa na orodha ama kutakuwa na kumbukumbu za majina na kampuni na biashara zinazohusika katika kaunti husika, ili kwamba wakati ambao wanataka ama wanawasilisha karatasi zao, stakabadhi zao, kuhakikisha kwamba biashara zao zinapewa leseni, ni rahisi serikali hizo kupata stakabadhi, majina ya wenye kampuni, na ni kampuni hizi zinafanya biashara ipi katika kaunti hizo. Mheshimiwa Spika, kingine ambacho kinadhihirika katika hoja ama katika mswada huu ni kuhakikisha kwamba wale ambao wamepewa leseni ama wamewasilisha stakabadhi zao kupata leseni, ni lazima serikali kuwapa majibu kwa muda unaostahili, kwamba itakapofika siku 28 kabla wao kupewa majibu, itakuwa kana kwamba serikali imekubali kwamba waendelee na kazi na kufanya biashara. Sasa ni jukumu la serikali husika kupitia stakabadhi hizi na kuwapa walioomba nafasi majibu kwa wakati unaostahili. Wasipofanya hivyo, wanabiashara hao wataendelea kufanya kazi zao, kwa sababu mswada ambao umeletwa hapa unajukumisha washikadau katika kaunti kufanya kazi zao jinsi inavyostahili. Mwisho kabisa, Mheshimiwa Spika, vijana na wale ambao ni chipukizi katika biashara wataweza kupata nafasi ya kulipia ushuru wao ama kulipia leseni zao kwa awamu moja, kwamba katika mfumo wa elektroniki anapobonyeza, na iwapo anataka kupata leseni mbalimbali, mfumo huu unamwezesha kupata idhini kwa wakati unaostahili na wakati huo huo. Sio jinsi inavyotendeka sasa, wanabiashara hao ama wawekezaji hao wanatundika guu zao begani kutoka ofisi moja hadi nyingine kutafuta leseni, ile hali mswada huu utafupisha gharama ya kazi, gharama ya uwekezaji, na hivyo kwamba kazi ifanyike jinsi inavyostahili. Sasa Mheshimiwa Spika, kutoka kwangu naunga mkono mswada huu kuhakikisha kwamba nchi inasonga mbele. Asante Mheshimiwa Spika.
Senator Moses Kajwang.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the County Licensing Uniform Procedures Bill that has been brought to the House. County Licensing Uniform Procedures Bill that has been brought to the House by Senator Mariam Omar. Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate Senator Mariam Omar. This is her first time in the Senate, and she did not even spend 1 year before she originated a bill that is as important as this one. Mr. Speaker, this is a bill that touches on many of the issues that we usually address on a day-to-day basis in the Public Accounts Committee. This is a bill that seeks to put in place uniform procedures for licensing of various activities by counties. And one of the ways in which county governments generate revenue is through the issuance of licenses for various activities related to their functions. And Mr. Speaker, the activities for which county governments can issue licenses are prescribed very clearly in the 4th schedule of the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, it has become very difficult for entities whose business interests span the 47 counties to comply and to apply for licenses. If, for example, you are an outdoor advertising agency that is based in Nairobi and you want to have your billboards across the 47 counties, you will be forced to deal with 47 licensing regimes. You will be forced to have perhaps 47 single business permits or 47 different licenses. Mr. Speaker, that is not the spirit that was envisaged when we set up county governments and when we allowed them to raise revenue at their local level. There needs to be a way of making life easy for those businesses that span the 47 counties. And I want to believe that that is the intention of this bill, to simplify things, to simplify life, and to reduce the instances of compliance from 47 to one straightforward instance of compliance. Mr. Speaker, I know that this bill, and I have not interacted with the report of the relevant committee, but this is a kind of bill that the Council of Governors is usually very fast to oppose, because they always argue that the Constitution gives them powers of subnational governments and they should be allowed to do things the way they deem it fit. In fact, sometimes they argue that when it comes to licensing and revenue raising, that is a sole mandate of the county assemblies. And as long as the county assemblies have enacted the finance bills or have passed the finance bills, then the Senate or any other national entity should not be dragged into that conversation. So, Speaker, whereas I sympathize with the powers of county governments to raise revenue and the power of county assemblies to be the ones to process the finance and the tax, the revenue-raising measures within the respective counties, but we must remember that the Constitution is still a unitary government. We still have a unitary government. Even though we have got 47 counties, we are still a unitary government. We are not a federal state. And so whatever the Senate does and whatever we do at the headquarters in Nairobi should ensure that Kenyans who are doing business across the 47 counties have got some sense of justice, have got some sense of fairness in the manner in which they are treated. Mr. Speaker, there are areas which we will need to ask ourselves whether one law, one overriding law, would be applicable across the 47 counties. We have seen instances, particularly in northern Kenya. In northern Kenya, one of the key concerns, one of the key pain points is on provision of water. And we have interrogated reports of the Auditor General, where the Auditor General cites a water project for non-compliance with the National Environmental Management Authority laws, or what we call NEMA. The Auditor General cites a water project because AWAMA, water, I think WARMA, there is that agency that is supposed to certify or supposed to approve certain projects within that space. That a borehole has been dug in northern Kenya, in an area that is extremely difficult to access, in an area where all they need is water. They don't care about what NEMA said or what WAMA said. But then the project is stopped, and the project is queried simply because WAMA did not license or NEMA did not license. And Mr. Speaker, we have found ourselves to be sympathetic with county governors in some of those instances. Because the residents of those areas, what they want is water. And what they want is clean water. And once they have clean water, children will be able to stay in school instead of roaming around looking for water and pasture. So sometimes when we have one framework legislation that cuts across, we must also ensure that there could be certain exceptions that can be made for some of those difficult situations. Technology adoption is also not uniform across the country. I've seen that there's a transition that has been proposed of 3 years for all county governments to ensure that there's a technological platform for uniformity of licensing across the 47 counties. I think 3 years is not too bad a proposal to make, because as things stand now, most of the, particularly telecommunication network, is concentrated along the tarmac, the 4G, the 5G, and there are some areas that are still on 2G in this republic. And you find 2G along tarmac roads. There are parts of this country, vast areas, that has never seen tarmac. In fact, they call tarmac a black snake because it is alien to them. We've gone to parts of Turkana, parts of Pokot, parts of Mandera, parts of Samburu, where they've never seen tarmac. And because these technologies and because some of these internet connectivity are provided by entities that are out to make profit, they are not going to put a mast in the middle of nowhere. They will put masts along the tarmac road. And so if you're going to expect someone in a far-flung corner of West Pokot to entirely rely on technology that sometimes requires a 5G internet connectivity to make an application for a license, that person will be in a position of unfairness as compared to the person who is in Nairobi, which is flooded with technology and flooded with connectivity. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, I want to encourage our county assemblies to take very seriously their mandate when it comes to approval of budgets and approval of revenue-raising measures in counties. Mr. Speaker, there are those who think that the Senate interferes with the mandate of county assemblies. There are those who think that even the interrogations we make of financial statements and reports of the Auditor General is something that should be done by county assemblies. Mr. Speaker, this Senate, from its inception, has drawn the line very clearly. In fact, when I see people going to court to ask where primary oversight ends and secondary oversight begins, I usually think that those are lazy people who have not taken time to appreciate the position the Senate has taken. Primary oversight is around approval of appointees to run county governments. That is a pure mandate of county assemblies that the Senate never encroaches on. The Senate only comes in when it comes to impeachment of the governor and the deputy governor. Otherwise, the persons responsible for running our county governments are appointed or are vetted by members of county assembly. That is primary oversight. Primary oversight is in approving budgets. The CIDPs, the ADPs, the county fiscal strategy papers, the appropriations, and the finance bills in county assemblies. That is a pure function of county assemblies that Senate never ever gets involved in. Once Senate divides and allocates revenue, we leave it to the county assembly to ensure that the plans that have been generated by governors are plans that are in line with the expectations of the public. When it comes to raising on-source revenue, again, the decisions on what to tax, whether to tax dogs or cats or chicken, or to put a tax if you cut down a tree, that decision is entirely in the hands of the county executive and the county assembly. The Senate never encroaches on it. Mr. Speaker, I want to encourage county assemblies to be confident and to be bold, because the same laws that we use here in Nairobi are the same laws that are available to them. The same powers that we have. The other day, Mr. Speaker, the State House Comptroller appeared before the Public Accounts Committee, and people were wondering, how can the State House Comptroller come to Parliament to talk about NMS? The same power that the Senate has to compel the State House Comptroller to come before the Senate is the same power that county assemblies have to compel the State House Comptroller to appear before the County Assembly of Nairobi and to explain issues to do with NMS. Mr. Speaker, I say this because these uniform licensing procedures, there are those who will argue that we are trying to prescribe to county assemblies how they should go about their business when it comes to processing finance bills. Mr. Speaker, if our county assemblies took their task and took their duty with the confidence and the seriousness that is required, I do believe that some of these multiple overlapping and duplicating licenses and levies that we see in counties would be a thing of the past. Mr. Speaker, the other bit that our county assemblies must take seriously is to ensure that they have got balanced budgets. Just last week, or this week, Mr. Speaker, we dealt with this case of Nairobi City County government that plans to collect 20 billion shillings, but only collects 10 billion. And that has been the trend from the onset of devolution. And Mr. Speaker, we directed the Auditor General to conduct a forensic audit on on-source revenue in Nairobi. And Mr. Speaker, this is relevant to what we are talking about, because if there is one county that has got more licenses than any other county, it is Nairobi City County. Unfortunately, you put people through the process of applying for licenses, for liquor, licenses for a premise to sell food, licenses to set up an outdoor advertisement facility, and Kenyans pay. Because if they don't pay, they'll be harassed by the city council askaris. And yet, whatever is reported as having been paid is half of what has been collected. So, Speaker, that is a shame, and those are some of the reasons that make people think that devolution was a bad idea. I'm still a believer in devolution. So, Speaker, if we can ensure that we've got faithful men and women, if we can make sure that we've got systems, that all these licenses that we are trying to harmonize, once they are harmonized, whatever is collected must be faithfully reported so that it can go back to serving taxpayers. Mr. Speaker, I support this bill. I congratulate Senator Mariam Omar, and as we continue to interact with it, perhaps we'll be able to make much more meaningful amendments to ensure that this framework that we are giving is not like the NMS, which one governor called Professor Lonyangapuo described as one dress that was made in Nairobi and sent to the counties with the expectation that it was going to fit all the governors and all the counties. I hope that Senator Mariam Omar has looked at the size of this bill appropriately so that it can fit the governor of Homa Bay, so that it can fit the governor of Kericho, and it can also fit the governor of Nyandarua. Mr. Speaker, I support.
Thank you, Senator Kajwang. I believe the agency you made reference to earlier on as Warma is the Water Resource Management Agency, and I hope the dress will also fit the governor of all the 47 counties. Senator Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I join the rest of my colleagues in, first of all, passing a word of congratulations to Senator Mariam Sheikh, a leader who's emerging and strongly distinguishing herself because of her diligence in this House. Mr. Speaker, Senator Mariam Sheikh is one of the few senators that on many afternoons when the House is virtually empty, such as today, you'll find her studiously silent with her pen and paper, making notes and contributions to the business that is before House. And therefore, it takes me by no surprise that colleagues such as Senator Kajwang have equally noted of her diligence. That is how you grow as a legislator, Mr. Speaker. I don't think there is any magic so that you can grow and stand tall like Senator Boni Alwale, who's been here since I was in high school and continues to serve in this House with great dedication, Mr. Speaker. So congratulations, Senator Mariam Sheikh. Please keep on at it, and while at it, encourage your colleagues, many of whom have formed the habit of checking into the House, slotting in the card. The only thing perhaps they remember for the afternoon is the pin of the card, Mr. Speaker, and leave the House. You'll find them idling or taking tea in our lounges. That's not what you're sent to do in Parliament, Mr. Speaker. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, I don't intend to be long on that, but just to commend what our dear sister is doing. This is a well thought out bill, Mr. Speaker, because I have been to many business forums, Mr. Speaker, and you know, we have seen quite a number here in KICC, in our counties, on the challenges that businesses continue to face in this country, especially those that are in the MSME space, Mr. Speaker, those that do business across counties and not very elaborate business to have the muscle, not to be boxed or challenged actually by county governments, Mr. Speaker. It is the smaller businesses, Senator Kajwang, you perhaps know this better, that face the wrath of many of our county administrations, especially when they try to expand into the next town. You find that young entrepreneur who has set up in Homa Bay, and within a short time they want to expand, say, to Nyamira and Kericho, which are the next neighborhood counties, Mr. Speaker. And the kind of challenges and bottlenecks that they go through is what has inspired this legislation, Mr. Speaker, that if you read through the objects of this bill, Mr. Speaker, is that it intends to give a uniform platform. The principal objects of the bill is to put in place uniform procedures for licensing various activities by counties. Mr. Speaker, this is informed, of course, by the second schedule of our Constitution on the various functions of our county governments and the powers that they have to determine what licenses they can give, at what rate, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, in the fact that we have thought as a House and want to propose now through this piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker, that let us have one standard that applies across all the 47 counties, Mr. Speaker, is quite encouraging. This is what I was speaking about a few minutes ago when I was reacting to the reports that were being given to us by the chairpersons of the committees, that Parliament must learn to be alive, Mr. Speaker. How is Parliament alive? Parliament is alive by reacting to the needs, specific, accurate, timely, that are before the people of Kenya, because that is what the reason for existence for us as a House, Mr. Speaker. And on many occasions, Mr. Speaker, that we have gone, I'm sure, I haven't been to any, I don't know what happened, but you know, Mr. Speaker, that we haven't had one this session, or maybe if it happened, then I missed out on it, Mr. Speaker, that Senator Kajwang, you'd know that on many occasions, we have the chance to interact with KEPSA, Kenya Private Sector Association, Mr. Speaker. And normally when they invite us, this is one of the key cries to us as a legislative body. Continuous licenses that are ununiform, Mr. Speaker, even not just in terms of procedure, but sometimes even in terms of price, Mr. Speaker, that you find that you are one entity. And if you want to quote, and I've often cited example, Mr. Speaker, because outdoor advertising is something that is controlled by county governments, Mr. Speaker, that you find that if you want to quote for a client, if you're an agency that has set up and you're now growing, you're in 14 counties, Mr. Speaker, you find that as you quote for your client, they may think that you're misleading them, Mr. Speaker, because you tell them the county license fee in county 1 will be 2,500, but by the time you get to county number 14, Mr. Speaker, is a different price altogether. And therefore, we give a lot of these challenges, or we pass them on to people that run businesses. And therefore, this bill will provide the opportunity and the platform for us to even the playing field so that our county governments actually can be entities that are facilitative of business and not barriers and a hindrance to them. I only have maybe one or two things, but maybe before I get to the challenges that I have noted with the bill, Mr. Speaker, allow me to perhaps celebrate some of what I'd consider to be glorious provisions that have been made on this particular bill, Mr. Speaker. Of course, you read about the obligations that in the implementation of this act, Mr. Speaker, or the enactment actually of the respective county legislation, you shall take into consideration the following. This bill now obligates all our county governments, the 47 of them, Mr. Speaker, because this law, Mr. Speaker, I believe shall be applicable to all our 47 county governments, and therefore it shall not be different in one as you move to other. First is the need to protect consumers of goods, services, and ensure public safety and provide and promote environmental protection. Mr. Speaker, why is this important? It is important, Mr. Speaker, because it is being assumed, and rightly so, Senator Mariam, that if you unify the county licensing procedure, that there are challenges that certain counties will not be very keen or diligent while observing these provisions, because they say, in any case, if we are not the ones that make the final determination of how this particular licensing procedure is, then I don't have to ensure. For example, on an issue of environment, Mr. Speaker, this is a very potent conversation that is going on in our country, Mr. Speaker, and globally as well. We are preparing next month or in the month of September to host a big global conference on climate change, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, it's encouraging to see that as we do our legislations, we are speaking to issues such as a promotion of environmental protection. Let's say, Mr. Speaker, you're in a business that a county government actually requires of you to provide evidence. I know this, say, for example, people that are in the renewable energy space, that you need to provide evidence that the disposable part of the wares that you trade in, Mr. Speaker, are well handled in ways that NEMA approve of. You don't go and dump illegally the effluents and the waste that are byproducts of whatever you're producing, Mr. Speaker, that there is that obligation on you. If we make it uniform in terms of the procedure for determination, then you'll find that certain counties are strong in enforcement, others are not. And that can bring a challenge, Mr. Speaker, because, you know, county governments are what the leaders of those counties have chosen them to be. And therefore, you'll find that if you find a county government where the governor or those that are responsible in enforcing of environmental protection laws, Mr. Speaker, are keen on it, then you will be obligated to do the same. But if you find a county where there is no strength of follow-up on the same, Mr. Speaker, then you may find people disregarding those laws, and that can present a very serious challenge. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, it is good that we have made it a provision in law that the obligation is on you, despite the fact that this is a uniform procedure, that there will be one platform upon which we license all these businesses across the county. We are not taking away your power as a county to still oversight, to still ensure that there is enforcement of standards of goods. You know, you will not say that this hotel, if people, for example, are found to be consuming contaminated food, then you blame it on, say, you know, you guys unified the procedure before, we used to do it differently. Once you sign on, and I believe all our county governments will have signed on, because the minute we pass this bill as a Senate of the Republic of Kenya, then it applies to all the 47 county governments. It will be tantamount to a voice of all the people of Kenya, Mr. Speaker. We will still have placed the obligation on the local county to ensure that those standards are observed, Mr. Speaker. Of course, the licensing authority as well shall ensure that the process of applying for licenses from respective authority is efficient and effective, by, of course, providing mechanisms of persons that make this simultaneous application for more than one license, preventing multiple licensing procedures. This is the same, so that you, on one button, Mr. Speaker, if your business is obtaining in more than one counties, then with one click of a button, because this is a digital world that we live in, and we are hoping, and that's our aspiration as a county government, Mr. Speaker, that you shall be able to complete that transaction, and you don't have to run with pieces of paper from Kisumu. You go to Siaya, from Siaya you finish with Homa Bay, you come to Kericho, you move to Kisii, you know, if you're operating in the western part of the country, Mr. Speaker. Of course, it provides as well in Section 7 of the bill for the licensing procedure. It's good that it is defined, Mr. Speaker, because, you know, when you don't legislate, when you don't provide the proper information and guidance, then there is room for abuse. Many people may come up with whatever they consider, and it is clearly defined in the bill on what an application for the grant, renewal and transfer or replacement of a license, Mr. Speaker, shall, number one, it needs to be made in writing, in a certain form, it needs to be signed by the applicant. The procedure needs to be set out, of course, Mr. Speaker, and the authorities that determine. Mr. Speaker, there is a provision which I think I heard Senator Kajwang vainly refer to, and I think it's something that we need to engage our heads properly before making a decision on it. Provision number 27 on this bill, Article 27, Mr. Speaker, still continues to give powers to a cabinet secretary. I don't think that is right. We cannot be passing legislation as a Senate of the Republic of Kenya. And I want the attention of Senator Kajwang, because you know that when we served in the devolution committee under you as our chair, we began this conversation of how do we ensure that as a Senate, instead of every time we legislate, we give the ultimate power to a cabinet secretary. Let us domesticate Council of Governors in statute so that we can begin to include them in laws. Because COG, and we have our views on it, we've gone full circle about the things that we agree and do not agree with them. I think now we have come of age, all of us, both at COG and us here in the Senate, should be the one that are making these regulations, as opposed to giving the power. This is part of the clawback. Part of the clawback on devolution is assisted by us as Senate. Because why are we obligating a cabinet secretary to make regulations that affect county governments? And we as a Senate are happy to pass on that particular bill. So that's a challenge I have with Section 27 of this bill. And when you made mention of it, Senator Kajwang, is when actually it struck my attention. I said, I need to read that particular provision. Therefore, Senator Mariam Sheikh, before you convince us to give you the final vote on passing, you need to rethink and tell us what you are going to do with provision, Section 27 of this particular bill, because I am not comfortable with us giving delegated power. Instead of empowering our county governments, we are returning them back to Nairobi here to get regulations. Let's quickly conclude on the business. I don't know how many members of devolution committee are in the House, Mr. Speaker, but we need to complete this business of domesticating COG in statute, and as well as CAF, you know, County Assemblies Forum, so that when we do legislation, Mr. Speaker, that requires a national, I know the struggle. Of course, the struggle is to find an anchor point where all the 47 county governments meet, and therefore the easier, or rather, let me replace actually, the correct wording is the lazier thing to do, Mr. Speaker, is simply to send them to the national government. Yet, that is not what we need. That is not entrenching devolution, which is part of the organs, Mr. Speaker, or one of the reasons for existence for us as a House. And therefore, I want to propose that we quickly move in that particular space, so that each time we do legislation such as this, anything that requires the coming together of all the 47 county governments, Mr. Speaker, then let COG take the lead in making the regulations. There are many times, Mr. Speaker, even laws that you are doing, including the law that you have proposed to this House, Mr. Speaker, on amendment to the T-bill, Mr. Speaker. Part of the challenges we have is the number of representatives of the county government vis-a-vis those of the national government. Yet, we know that agriculture, Mr. Speaker, is largely devolved Yet when you see the board that we pass here, you have a representative from the Ministry of Trade, from Treasury, Ministry of Agriculture, yet only 2 representatives from COG, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, these are conversations that we need to have. Over and above that, Mr. Speaker, of course, there is a proposal for the licensing authority being required to serve notice on people. Mr. Speaker, I love that because, you know, it is very easy for people to misbehave thanks to this particular law, because there'll be an imagination that local enforcement will be hindered, Mr. Speaker, by the fact that this law has been uniformly passed here at the Senate, and therefore the specific county government doesn't have the power to hold a particular individual to account. I like that Senator Mariam Sheikh has provided for that, and there's still powers to the local licensing authorities who can give notice if you are not compliant. You know the conversation, for example, that we are having about liquor licensing, Mr. Speaker. And I know for a fact, Mr. Speaker, that very soon, part of the proposals that we shall be having, in fact, if there is a timely, there has never been more of a timely bill that is alive to a situation and a conversation that's going on in the country, such as this bill, Mr. Speaker, with the alcohol and drug abuse situation in our county governments, Mr. Speaker. You find that a particular county has passed laws, Mr. Speaker, when we handed over the powers to license to our county governments, and that's why you have the challenges that you're having in various parts of the country, where you find a small shopping center, Mr. Speaker, that because of the contribution that, say, liquor licenses providers give to our county governments, you find that the rain has been opened, and in a small center, you find 2 or 3 kiosks, then 17 bars, Mr. Speaker, that have all been licensed. There's only one butchery, so that the day, if there is a drunkard who is rich on that particular day, that's where they stream. But the rest of all his colleagues, then the 16 other bars, Mr. Speaker. We need to make it uniform. That procedure and that authority is what is being provided in this particular law, so that even counties can benchmark and know how you handling this situation. What number of bars are you licensing per square foot, per population of people, you know, distance, proximity to schools, you know, procedures that can be listed down and county governments can learn from each other, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, that's extremely important. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I celebrate the good work that has been done by our colleague, excuse me, Senator Mariam Sheikh. I wish our colleagues can continue to generate such business for us to consider as a House, Mr. Speaker, so that we can entrench the success of devolution, Mr. Speaker. So I support this bill, Mr. Speaker, with only that rider and provision, and challenge back to Senator Mariam to perhaps guide us on what we are going to do with provision section 27 of the bill, Mr. Speaker. I am a bit uncomfortable with us returning county governments to still be subject to resolutions or regulations that are made, Mr. Speaker, by the national government. With those many remarks, I support and congratulate Senator Mariam. Thank you.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Senator Ogola Beatrice Akinye.
Honorable Speaker, I rise to support this bill by Senator Mariam. And Senator, just as my colleague senators have indicated, is a young legislator whom I admire so much. Just to say in short, Senator is a God-fearing young legislator, sober, objective, responsive, and Senator, I think you are going far. And especially having also listened to the commendations by our ranking member, Senator Moses Kajwang, and my old friend, the Majority Leader, Senator Aaron, also said so. And Honorable Speaker, I start by where the Senator of Kericho had mentioned that as a Senate, sometimes we contribute into clawing back some of the benefits that we've made so far in devolution. And Senator Aaron spelled out the reference of the cabinet secretary, a reference which a number of us continue to make in so many of their bills. Probably that is the only thing I agree with Senator Aaron Cheruiyot, especially in the last few weeks. I've not been very impressed with my friend. He's a senator I used to look up to, even before I came here in his debates. But he must come back on track and follow the God-given path. But Honorable Speaker, coming back to this bill by Senator Mariam, I support this bill because, Honorable Speaker, the bill promotes efficiency and effectiveness. Honorable Speaker, the sponsor of the bill makes reference to doing away with multiple application procedures that we've always seen in some of the licensing procedures, especially in our county government. The bill promotes a uniform way that calls for standardization and that promotes efficiency and effectiveness, Honorable Speaker. This bill, Honorable Speaker, ensures that licensing is consolidated. And once it is consolidated, Mr. Speaker, sir, it gives our business people ease of doing business. And Honorable Speaker, I think that is the main purpose of doing business. That once somebody is doing business and it is licensed, it should provide an easy way of operations. Honorable Speaker, this bill ensures that there's a standard of goods and services that are offered. It is clearly spells out that the goods, that services that are going to be licensed, there's a prescribed standard that the bill spells out. And Honorable Speaker, I also support this bill because it spells out a procedure of licensing. It spells out the duration of the license and the condition for the renewal of these licenses. Honorable Speaker, the bill also spells out how license records are going to be kept. Honorable Speaker, the only thing I would have liked for the senator who is the mover of this bill to consider is that once licensed, and Honorable Speaker, is because this forms an income for the county governments, that the county governments, once they provide licensing for their traders, the governments must also give back to the business people in terms of services that are offered. Honorable Speaker, sometimes when you walk around in our counties, you go to markets, you go to trading centers, you go to certain municipality headquarters, and you see our people doing businesses. But around them, even the sanitation is not kept as to standards, and yet the businesses have been licensed. The rules of natural justice requires that once you get some income for me, I'm also entitled to some service. And so, Honorable Mariam should consider if that could be spelled out, that our people get certain services, they must access their business premises. That means some access roads should be built, should be made available by the county government. Honorable Speaker, why I say this is that an area like transport, infrastructure, once you avail such a service as infrastructure, it means you are giving access to business, doing business. It means you are giving access to employment. It means you're giving access to people going for services like water. It means you're giving access to even people going for health services. So, Honorable Speaker, as the licensing bill spells out the conditions for which these licenses will be brought, there must be some reference of some clawing back by the government that the business people are also entitled to certain services, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, this bill is also convenient to the extent that it consolidates licenses. Honorable Speaker, it has been very inconveniencing to most of our business people because, as the last speakers have indicated, you go and get a license for business A, you get another license for business B, C, D, and E. But, Honorable Speaker, with the consolidation of the process, we are going to end up with business made easier. Honorable Speaker, another area which has impressed me and why I support this bill is that it ensures that the fees that are being collected are not prohibitive and do not hinder the act of doing business. Because, Honorable Speaker, there has been a perception out there in our counties that sometimes the big businesses or big entities or areas are not licensed. The fees that is attached to their license is not equivalent to the businesses, that you find our small business women selling probably a trough or just some tomatoes, not even worth 2,000 shillings, not even, because, Honorable Speaker, the small businesses, some of them are women just selling tomatoes equivalent to even 500 shillings per day, or 2,000, or 1,000. But they are able to collect some fees from them. Honorable Speaker, I'm impressed that this bill ensures that fees are not going to be prohibitive, and so our people are going to do business with ease. Honorable Speaker, I support this bill.
Senator Methu John Muhia, proceed to give your contribution.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me this opportunity to rise and support this well thought of bill by my colleague, Senator Mariam Sheikh. Senator Mariam Sheikh is a member of a committee that I chair, and the members of that committee, if they are here, they will tell you that we refer to her as our midfielder, because she and Senator Beatrice Oyomo rarely misses meetings of that committee. They are the fulcrum around which that committee operates, and I'm very happy that they are members of that committee. We've never faced quorum hitches when they are around, Senator Beatrice and Senator Mariam Sheikh. And just as the leader of majority mentioned, they are always with a book and a pen, taking notes and contributing to the various proceedings, both in the House and in the committees. So I congratulate her that she has taken this very bold step of coming up with this bill. Mr. Speaker, without taking so much time so that I allow my colleagues to also give their input on this bill, I feel that this is a very, very timely bill, Mr. Speaker, in the sense that, as my colleagues who have spoken before me have spoken, even though part of the on-source revenue of most of the counties is from licensing, it then must be regularized. One of the principles of application that have been proposed in this particular bill, Mr. Speaker, if there is one thing that has really caught my eye, is simplicity of the process. Simplicity of the process, Mr. Speaker, is, and I believe, is meant to address the very small businesses that are coming up. It does not make any sense, Mr. Speaker, that a kinyozi person in a small town called Henny in Nyandarua has to go all the way to another sub-county headquarter called Engineer for 3, 4, 5 days because of just a simple process of applying for a license, Mr. Speaker. This process should be simple. It should be easy. Government should be able to create an enabling environment for business people, Mr. Speaker, so that they are able to do business. Mr. Speaker, on another principle of application for licensing proposed in this bill, Mr. Speaker, is equity, transparency, and accountability. More often than not, Mr. Speaker, this is, has been a preserve of a few people, that so many people apply, but not every person is subjected to a standard procedure of getting licenses. I'll give an example, Mr. Speaker. In licensing, Mr. Speaker, for a county like Nyandarua, a bar and alcoholic drinks licenses, Mr. Speaker, because that is one of the major places where governors are used to reward their people. People are not subjected to a standard way of licensing, Mr. Speaker. There has not been equity in this particular area, Mr. Speaker, and I actually I'm very proud and I feel very happy that it is being addressed by this bill, Mr. Speaker. Another principle, Mr. Speaker, is access to information relating to licensing, and one of in section 11 of this bill, Mr. Speaker, Senator Mariam has proposed that part of how information shall be available to the members of the public, Mr. Speaker, is to have this information printed on the print media on one of the major dailies, Mr. Speaker. But I would wish to ask my colleague, Senator Mariam, to widen that scope, Mr. Speaker, because more often than not, and you know it, Mr. Speaker, there will be an advert, and it will be said that there was an advert, but it is meant to be seen by specific people, because it's a very small liner at the, just next to the obituaries, so you're not able to see it, Mr. Speaker. If anything, the leading newspaper vendor, the leading newspapers in Kenya, they print less than 100,000 copies for 50 million Kenyans. We should be able to increase this scope, Mr. Speaker, to not only include print media, it should go even to the electronic media. It should be announced on radios and TVs, so that a person in a small remote village in Homa Bay will be able to know that licensing is happening. The licensing authority has opened that avenue, because, Mr. Speaker, this privilege is abused. You just open a window, 14 days for people to apply. You put a small advert in a newspaper, and then you alert your people that the advert is there, so they go apply. When other people complain, you tell them it was in the media, it was in the newspaper, you didn't apply, that's why you have been locked out, Mr. Speaker. Another principle that has been proposed in this bill, Mr. Speaker, is to enable license holders to adjust to changes with minimum friction. It is ringing in my mind, Mr. Speaker, how many businesses were affected by the just ended, or the, I don't know whether it's an ongoing pandemic or it is ended, the COVID pandemic, Mr. Speaker. So many businesses had to be forced to be readjusted, including, and I would want to give an example, Mr. Speaker, for a person operating a bar and restaurant, the license that I get for alcoholic drinks or opening hours are 24 hours, Mr. Speaker. But government had proposed that, or government had given, had ordered that all bars must be closed by 7 p.m., Mr. Speaker. So then there was a lot of friction in application for their licenses, because your license is, says that you are supposed to close at, you are not supposed to close actually, but you're being told by government that so this friction, Mr. Speaker, should be addressed, and it is an ongoing, as it is now, Mr. Speaker. Government has given licenses for harvesting of fallen trees, and something else that they are calling thinning. You know, Mr. Chairman, I'm also the chairman of the Committee on Environment, Mr. Speaker. But the licenses have not been issued or have not been issued because, harvesting forest products has been banned for quite some time, Mr. Speaker. So there should be a framework so that we allow those ones that have licenses to be able to do their business in peace. Mr. Speaker, on the licensing procedure, Senator Mariam has proposed that in 3 years, all licensing authorities should be able to allow electronic application. Mr. Speaker, this is a major departure from the past. We, and I serve with Senator Moses Kajwang, he is my chairman in the Committee of Public Accounts of the Senate, and we know, and it has been made by very many governors, that for them to succeed and for them to raise their revenues, for them to seal all the loopholes in the revenue streams, Mr. Speaker, the way to go is electronic application. A person in a small village in Marsabit, Mr. Speaker, should be able to apply for a license and get a license, Mr. Speaker, without necessarily visiting the sub-county office, Mr. Speaker, without necessarily knowing Senator Mohamed Said Chute, without necessarily knowing the governor of Marsabit. He should be able to apply for a license from, if you want to operate a kinyozi. In a village, I wish I knew, I had an example of a village in Marsabit, Mr. Speaker. A person in a village who wants to open a salon does not need to travel all the way to the county, the sub-county headquarters to apply for a license. It should be made easy that you can be able to apply, so that even the licensing authority can be able to visit you in your village. The issue with the license, Mr. Speaker, so that you're able to do your business, Mr. Speaker. Another matter that has caught my eye again, Mr. Speaker, is Article 13 of this bill, Mr. Speaker, that says that the period upon which an application for a license must be considered must be 28 days, Mr. Speaker. Because I imagine a person who is applying for a license is a person who is either in business or a person who wants to open a business, Mr. Speaker. So if you are government and you are the one that you want to put them behind, you are not efficient, you don't want to process the license in good time, Mr. Speaker, then you are not creating an enabling environment for that business person, Mr. Speaker. So 28 days, Mr. Speaker, is good enough. If it were me, I would even have reduced it, but 28 days is also okay, Mr. Speaker. And also it has been proposed in the bill, Mr. Speaker, the notice of decision to either grant you a license or refuse to grant you a license must be given to you in 7 days. Mr. Speaker, you know this is something that has been abused for a long time, that your application, Mr. Speaker, is not approved. They slip on the papers. You do not know whether you do not know what your fate is, whether it has been approved, whether it has not been approved. So you're not even able to appeal. You just you just sit there. You don't know what has happened, Mr. Speaker. On something else, and I was actually expecting that Senator Moses Kajwang would speak about it, because he speaks about it every time we sit in the Public Accounts Committee. We were told, and we had, when we were looking at the books of a certain county government that I would not want to mention here, that some officials of the licensing authorities, they produce their own licenses, they take them to the business people, and they do not have any feature that would distinguish them from the real licenses, Mr. Speaker. Then this leads to loss of public funds, a lot of losses, and I feel that this one has been cured by the proposal in the bill by Senator Mariam. Article 16, a license issued under this section shall include a unique identifier, that original licenses from the licensing authority are able to be distinguished from fake licenses, from rogue licensing, officers who collude with business people to go and, you produce your own license, you go and take to the business people, you get the money does never makes it to the owners' basket, Mr. Speaker. So this one, Mr. Speaker, is a major win for the counties, because the way for the counties is to expand their, their own source, so that they're able to move to move ahead. So it will also include the name of the licensing authority, the name of the licensee, so that it is not transferable. If it is Stewart Mazao who have applied for a license, it will remain in the name of Stewart Mazao until that license expires. It's not able to to be transferred by to his friends, as it has been the case in the past, Mr. Speaker. Finally, Mr. Speaker, on the cancellation of licenses, Mr. Speaker, I am praying that this shall not become then an avenue for appointing authorities to punish people who disagree with them, because I find the clause has left so much room for the licensing authority that at the whim of the licensing authority, your license can be cancelled. I don't know then how we are able to tighten this particular part, Mr. Speaker, so that we are able to protect those people who are applying for licenses. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to say anything more than that. I thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support the bill. I hope that the few amendments that are required so that we make a very good law for our counties shall be able to, shall find some way of getting into this bill, Mr. Speaker, so that we strengthen devolution, so that we are able to strengthen the county governments by enabling them collect enough revenue within the right frameworks. I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Methu, thank you for your contributions. Senator Catherine Muyeka Muma.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to contribute to this bill. And I would like to congratulate my colleague, Senator Mariam, for thinking through this very, very important issue. Mr. Speaker, trading at the county level is the activity that will trigger and grow the economy of Kenya. And at the center of this is the issue of licensing. So this is an extremely important issue, and I am glad that Senator Mariam, who's being disrupted by Senator Methu, and Senator Methu looks like a sergeant at arms, so I don't even know whether, for a second I thought maybe it is sergeant at arms going to do something there. But yes, I can continue, Mr. Speaker. This is a very important law bill. And Mr. Speaker, I'd like to support what colleagues who have gone before me have said, that it is a very good bill, but it can be better with the number of proposals that have been given, and I hope the Honorable Senator will take this into account. Mr. Speaker, trading is not usually limited. Most people who trade do not just trade in one county. One of the problems we have heard is somebody who is trading in three counties that are next to each other, sometimes in 6 counties across the country. And one of the things, the challenges we have had since devolution, is the requirement of multiple licenses and permissions in each county. You have goods that you are bringing from Kitui County to Nakuru County, and by the time you have gone through the different counties to reach Nakuru, each of the counties that you're passing through is requiring for you to pay some levy or other. Mr. Speaker, we also have that trader who has a business in Kakamega with customers in Bungoma, in Vihiga, in Kisumu, in Eldoret. And Mr. Speaker, whereas this bill has properly focused on issues of licensing around a county, I would have wanted to see a reflection of the nature of the devolution in Kenya. Our devolution is a cooperative and consultative devolution. And Mr. Speaker, as we have said time and again, that the weakest link in the implementation of devolution in Kenya has been how to strengthen the inter-county relations, both for national and county governments and county with county intergovernmental relations. This bill provides an opportunity for the 47 counties to come out with the minimum common standards and leave just a little for the variations that will be specific to each county's unique situation. So I would have wanted to see those opportunities that allow for inter-county trade and the kind of licensing that would make sense for inter-county trade, so that we are able to provide clauses that can facilitate consultations and cooperations between counties in order to facilitate better and easier trading among those who will be trading in these counties. Mr. Speaker, that has not been very, very clear, and I'm urging that Senator Mariam considers providing clauses that can bring in that inter-county cooperation, that can bring in that inter-county consultation, that can bring in recognition of licenses of one county by the other county in order to ease the burden, the current burden, multiple burdens against traders as they pass from one county to the other. Mr. Speaker, I would want to ask that the mover also relooks at the definition of the licensing authority. The definition of the licensing authority says it's a person who provides licenses. But that definition is so loose. When you look into the actual bill, the licensing authority is either a person or an entity with so much power that is not precisely anchored for us to be able to know what does this mean. You possibly might want to begin with an enabling clause that mandates counties to establish a licensing authority for purposes of doing A, B, C, D, so that that authority is either a mechanism, a legal mechanism, or as you put it, a person, but you need to know, is it best placed in an individual or is it best placed in an entity? While at the same time being careful not to establish an unnecessary semi-autonomous entity at the county that can only just take away more funds from the taxpayer. So I would want you to think through the issue of the licensing authority, how we want to anchor them, and how we want to put it, and what relationship they will have. We will have of one licensing authority and another licensing authority, where the business we are talking about is a business that transcends across counties and requires that we provide some easement or easier route for those who are trading in that particular business. Mr. Speaker, I do agree with Majority Leader that clause 27 should not be here. Mr. Speaker, I think the licensing business is, for purposes of county, is county business, and we cannot take licensing on functions of counties and then give it to the national government or to a cabinet secretary to start making regulations. Once we make this law, we need to be able to say that this will be the minimum common laws that would apply on the 47 counties, but thereafter, each county assembly will make the necessary regulations for purposes of implementing the law at the county. Of course, that power could very well be given to the CEC for trade in consultation with the county assembly, or whichever way that you will find to be most best suited to deliver on that issue. Mr. Speaker, we also have regional blocks. The county, I happen to be in the devolution committee, and within the devolution committee, we are trying to find ways of legislating the inter-county, intergovernmental entities that can facilitate the thinking through this. If you look at the Intergovernmental Relations Act, it provides for sectoral committees. We therefore have a sectoral trade committee established under the Intergovernmental Relations Act. To what extent would the law that you're making be a subject area for the Intergovernmental Committee on Trade and other related matters? So I would want to urge that we find a way of making those linkages that are provided for and contemplated by the constitutional provision on intergovernmental relations for consultation and cooperation, and know that we will have entities that are not just serving one county, but entities that are actually able to serve a region or able to serve 2 counties. Mr. Speaker, if the Honorable Senator takes all this into account and makes the necessary linkage, I believe she is in the right path. We need a law that can help to ease business within the counties, because I do believe it is at the counties that the economic growth of this country will happen. And if we don't put in place the necessary regulatory framework to facilitate that, we will be delaying what we needed yesterday. Thank you, Mr.